Hey, welcome to day 9 of our 30-day challenge. Today we're talking about the 11 common challenges in beekeeping. And listen, no beekeeping journey is without its challenges. And we'll discuss some of these common issues that beekeepers face and how you can troubleshoot them if you're a beekeeper and support beekeepers if you aren't. Hello and welcome back to our channel. Today we're going to talk about a topic that affects all of us. That's honey. Honey is a delicious and natural sweetener that's been enjoyed by humans for thousands of years. But did you know that not all honey is created equal? In fact, there's a growing problem with fake honey that's threatening beekeeping and the honey industry as a whole. So, what exactly is fake honey? Fake honey is a sweet, syrupy substance that's made to look and taste like real honey, but it's not. It's usually made by mixing real honey with other sweeteners such as corn syrup or sugar water. This is done to increase profits, as real honey is much more expensive to produce and it's hard to harvest. So the problem with fake honey is that it's not only a fraud, but it's also harmful to the environment and the beekeeping industry. When bees collect nectar from flowers, they also help pollinate the plants. This process is essential for the growth and reproduction of many crops and plants. But when bees are fed with sugar water instead of real nectar foraged from the field and from the bush, they become weaker and more susceptible to diseases, and they could get dysentery and die, and all of this can also lead to weakening overall of the hive and the colony, and that could also lead to colony collapse disorder. Beekeeping is a challenging and time-consuming task that requires a lot of knowledge and care. There's a lot of learning curve as well, and a huge capital investment in all the equipment and hives and time required. Beekeepers need to monitor the health of their bees, manage the hives, and harvest the honey at the right time. But with the rise of fake honey, beekeepers face even more challenges. They need to make sure that their bees are not exposed to contaminated food sources and that their honey is not mixed with fake honey during the production process. And in addition to this, it's also a massive issue with regards to costings and the downward pressure on price, as a price war comes into play when some elements and organizations are creating a much cheaper product which is being marketed and labeled and sold to consumers, you and me and everybody out there, as mislabeled as actual honey when it's not even honey, or it's a small percentage of honey with a larger portion mixed and blended with things like corn syrup and or sugar water, but still labeled as honey, which is absolute fraud. So fake honey is a growing problem that affects the environment and the beekeeping industry, and as consumers you can help by choosing honey that's certified by reputable organizations and avoiding products that can contain fake and adulterated honey. As beekeepers, we need to be vigilant and take measures to protect our bees and our honey, especially the honey market. Make sure you're talking to customers and to consumers. Explain to them. Take time to actually educate them and let them know what is happening out there in the market and why it's important to be sourcing real honey from real people that are keeping bees and not using corn syrup and sugar water and sugar syrup to make honey and blend it together. So what are the findings? In 2018, South African authorities seized over 13 tons of honey that was labeled as pure honey, but was found to be adulterated with sugar syrup. Now, it's interesting that adulterated also means fake. It's another way of saying fake. I've had somebody comment, a number of people comment actually on my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/BeeWareOnline, that what is adulterated? The question was, what is adulterated honey? Does that mean it's now an adult honey that's become an adult? And I'm like, no. It's another word for fake. So the honey was imported from Zambia in this case, and the South African Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries, which has now changed its name, has warned consumers to be cautious when buying honey. As a study published in the Journal of Food Control in 2019 analyzed honey samples from South Africa, Zambia and Zimbabwe and found that 38% of the samples were adulterated with sugar syrup or other sweeteners. That's huge. You know, I mean, we're talking almost 40% here of the bottles on your shelves in your retailers actually contain sugar syrup and not honey. In 2020, The South African Honeybee Industry Association, or SAHIA, reported that Chinese imports of honey were increasing, and some of the honey was believed to be adulterated or mislabeled, or both. SAHIA has called for stricter regulations and enforcements to prevent fake honey from entering the South African market, and also protecting the price margins for local producers and local beekeepers who are making honey out of the real thing from nectar versus this fake honey that's coming in at a much cheaper price. And retailers who are buying this stuff are under the impression or ignorant of the fact that what they're doing is actually putting a fraudulent product on their shelves and selling it to consumers mislabeled as honey. China is one of the largest honey producers in the world, and the country has been accused of exporting this adulterated version or mislabeled honey to other countries. In 2019, Chinese authorities announced a crackdown on honey fraud, and several companies were actually fined for selling fake honey around the world. Other countries such as India and Vietnam have also reported problems with fake honey, and in 2021, the Vietnamese Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development actually warned consumers about honey that was labeled as pure honey but was found to be adulterated with sugar syrup. Now, going back in South Africa a number of years, actually, there's a clip here I've got from Carte Blanche, which was also an old archived episode called Sweet Deception. Take a look at this. Let me know what you think in the comments below.
The Great Honey Deception. Do you know whether the honey you're buying in stores is the real deal? Many bottles are labeled as pure honey, but the reality is some of them are filled with sugar syrup, and unsuspecting buyers don't know the difference. So whose responsibility is it to stop this deception? Here's Devi.
Raw pure honey, straight from the hive and into the bottle. Healthy, delicious, and a great sugar alternative. That's what you think you are buying in every bottle of honey. But the shocking news is that the bad boys of South Africa's honey trade are adulterating your honey with cane sugar.
I want to show you this honey, Devi. This is honey that was given to us. That is clearly adulterated honey.
Mike Miles is chairman of the South African Bee Industry Organization, or SABIO.
And these findings suggest that the fake honey problem is a global issue that affects many countries, including South Africa, Zambia, China, South America, and others. It's important for consumers and regulators to be vigilant and take measures to ensure that honey is pure and that it's free from adulteration. Now, I would also add to this, guys, beekeepers, all the beekeepers out there that are watching this, that it is also vital to educate and make sure that you are taking time to let your customers and your consumers know, wherever possible, however possible, as often as possible, that there is a problem out there with fake honey, and that they should be purchasing honey from known and reputable beekeepers that actually have hives in the fields, or where shops that are supporting people where the suppliers actually have hives and colonies out in the bush and out on the field. All right? I think that's a vital issue that we need to address and to continue to educate and make people aware in South Africa and around the world to do that. Right, so let me know about your comments below, what you think about fake honey and what you think about adulteration, and what your approach would be, and how you see us working together as an organization, as an industry, to combat this going forward. Now, another common challenge for South Africans, but also beekeepers around the world, is theft and vandalism. It's a significant challenge faced by beekeepers in South Africa, and they can have a significant impact on the beekeeping industry, again, raising costs and also raising the barrier to entry for other beekeepers to come in and start making more local honey that can improve the supply, improve the local supply, so that there's less honey, less demand on this fake honey, even though there's a price differential. Or, on the other hand, we could be becoming an exporting industry where we actually take our certified honey that's real honey and export it to countries that are going to preferably buy our honey at a better rate because of the exchange rate, knowing that it's also locally produced and it's not fake. So that's another option as well to look into. And I've been discussing this on Facebook groups all over the place and in social media. as an option going forward for the beekeeping industry in South Africa, especially with fake honey as well, and rising costs of inputs, and that local retailers are obviously looking at buying this stuff that's being imported rather than buying from local producers simply on the basis of price, and potentially on some issue it comes down to supply as well. But let's get back to theft and vandalism. So loss of hives. Beehives are often stolen by thieves who sell them for profit or use them to start their own beekeeping operations or add to their existing operations. This can result in significant financial losses for the beekeeper involved or beekeepers, who may have to spend time and money replacing the stolen hives. And on top of that, especially the more complicated and more difficult part of that is actually replacing the colonies and building them up again in order to produce honey, because that takes time. Damage to property, vandalism of beehives, the equipment and the property can also result in financial losses for beekeepers, as well as loss to access of property, access to sites. If there's vandalism taking place, but maybe gates were broken, maybe there was other damage, there was potentially fire involved, and that caused damage to and loss to property that didn't belong to the beekeeper because they had permission to put their bees on that property, and now the vandals have come along and completely destroyed that as well. So they may destroy hives, they can kill or harm the bees, they also may damage the equipment, property, which can be expensive to repair or to replace. So the loss of bees, though, is the massive issue, okay? Theft or vandalism can cause the loss of bee colonies, which can have a significant impact on the beekeeping industry as a whole. For every colony that's lost to vandalism is at least a season's worth of honey production gone, okay? So bees play a crucial role in pollinating crops and producing honey, and if you lose a colony or a queen gets damaged in the process, it takes a lot of effort and input to get back to where the colony was and where the beekeeper was prior to the vandalism and the loss of bees. And it also can lead to a decrease in crop yield and therefore a shortage of honey as well. So farmers could lose out. Food security can also come under threat and be a risk. And then, of course, there's the shortage of honey. So there's also, in addition to that, a risk to personal safety. Theft and vandalism can also pose a risk to the personal safety of beekeepers. Thieves and vandals may be armed and dangerous, and confrontations with them can be violent and unpredictable. Some people have lost their lives, some people have lost their vehicles as well. It is not a pleasant challenge in the beekeeping industry, and to address these challenges, beekeepers in South Africa and around the world may take measures to protect their hives and their property, such as installing security cameras or fencing or both. They may also work with law enforcement officials where that may work out. I don't know how practical that may work out in a positive result at the end. But to identify and prosecute those who engage in this theft using the camera technology. Additionally, community education and awareness campaigns may help to prevent the theft and vandalism, and also promote the value of beekeeping as an important industry in the local area, especially if people may be being employed to help in the situation. But also there's new technology that's coming out where you can actually can place trackable GPS equipment in hives, and when there's a motion sensor that gets triggered, it'll notify you on your phone on an app, and then you can react. You can either call the police and or react yourself and go out and track what's happened with these colonies and with these beehives, and know that there's something going on with regards to your apiary without actually physically being there. So this new technology is pretty cool. It's been around for about a year or so, and it is becoming available in South Africa as well. So if you're interested in that, let me know in the comments below and we can have a chat. Right, so moving on to the next common challenge. This one's going to be poisoning, and usually it takes place via pesticides. It's a serious challenge affecting beekeepers around the world and the broader ecosystem as well in which the bees operate. Here's what I found after investigating this issue like a prize-winning journalist, right? So background, the honeybees play a crucial role in pollinating crops and plants. Their decline due to poisoning and pesticides has significant implications for our food security as well as the broader biodiversity, okay, the whole ecosystem. Pesticides, herbicides, and other chemicals can harm or kill honeybees or the the beneficiaries of bees, for bees rather, and the widespread use in agriculture has contributed to the poisoning of honeybees in many parts of the world. So in South Africa, the poisoning of honeybees is a significant challenge faced by beekeepers, and according to the South African Bee Industry Organisation, or SABIO, the indiscriminate use of pesticides and herbicides is a major cause of honeybee poisoning, and it can have a devastating effect on bee colonies and apiaries managed by beekeepers, especially where crop pollination is involved. During our investigation, we spoke with several beekeepers who shared their experiences of honeybee poisoning. One beekeeper from Mpumalanga reported losing over 50 beehives due to poisoning, while another from the Western Cape reported losing 90% of their bee colonies in a single year. We also spoke with experts in the field, including Dr. Kirsten Traynor, a beekeeping educator and researcher based in the United States, and Dr. Traynor, details in the description below, emphasize the importance of beekeepers understanding the risks of pesticides exposure and taking steps to protect their bees. The use of neonicotinoid pesticides, or neonics, or nicotinoids, in particular, has been linked to honeybee decline in many parts of the world, and these pesticides are widely used in agriculture to protect crops from pests, but they can harm honeybees and other pollinators by affecting their nervous systems. This is one of the reasons why the European Union is actually fighting ongoing battles with companies like Bayer and Monsanto around the legal use of neonicotinoids, and they actually ended up winning a case in the courts, in the Supreme Courts, and being able to get the use of neonicotinoids banned as well. But the companies are now, obviously with really, really deep pockets, and it's a massive income earner for them, have now gone back to court and are battling them again over the same use of those pesticides. So to address the poisoning of honeybees, beekeepers in South Africa are taking steps to protect the hives and to advocate for changes in agricultural practices. So these include promoting use of organic farming methods where possible and as much as possible, creating pesticide-free zones for bees and or alternate natural pesticides and natural ways of controlling pests, and working with government officials to develop regulations that protect honeybees in these cases. However, more needs to be done to address this critical issue. In addition to promoting sustainable agricultural practices, researchers and policymakers need to work together to develop new solutions for protecting honeybees from poison and pesticides. This may include the development of new pesticides that are less harmful to bees, or the promotion of natural methods, as I mentioned earlier, for pest control. Ultimately, the poisoning of honeybees is a complex issue that requires a multifaceted response. By raising awareness of the issue and advocating for change in the understanding and belief that something like neonicotinoids is the be-all and end-all of being able to control pests, beekeepers, researchers, and policymakers can work together to protect honeybees and ensure the survival for generations to come. So moving on to the next common challenge, that's synthetic honey. Now, we've recently done a newsletter on this and social media talk about this, where synthetic honey is another massive challenge. In fact, probably potentially even bigger than the varroa mite, in my opinion, and potentially even bigger than fake honey at this point. It's early days, and I think that's why it's maybe not necessarily seen as such a threat or such a risk, but I foresee that this could be a major issue for beekeeping industry. And here he talks about, it's 20,000 types of bees. Only 7 of them apparently make honey, which is false. There's about 25 that make honey. Bees are dying. There are people that are abusing them, but we aren't just choosing 7 bee species out of 20,000 to do this. There are only actually about 27 that actually make honey around the world out of that 20,000 plus. Yeah, this saying about Albert Einstein, I used to say this one as well quite a bit in the beginning, but then I found out that it wasn't something that Albert Einstein actually said. But yeah, there you go. 4 people, friends in Israel. They've started this business, makes honey, inverted commas, without bees. They've basically built a stomach. They've basically taken the chemicals from a bee's stomach, gotten nectar from a plant somehow, put the two together in the lab, and then proteins from the bee's stomach. They use that machine, they mix the two together, and Bob's your uncle. They come out with this synthetic honey. Wasn't foraged by bees. Apparently it tastes like honey, it smells like honey, looks like honey, and probably for the most part is as close as you're going to get to the real thing without having bees involved. Alright, but you see now why this to me is probably the biggest threat right now to the bee industry. It is a big deal, and it's going to completely change the honey industry, in my opinion, and the dynamics around honey production, and possibly even turn majority of beekeepers into, now especially the commercial operators, into pure pollination, limiting the amount of honey production that they're going to focus on. But what he comes up with next is quite interesting. He talks about a coffee plant here, right? And the way that it's put, Nas, dude, love you, but bees already do that, man. They already make honey that's from coffee trees, and it has a bit of a taste of coffee, and it has caffeine in it. Bees do that. It's not like it hasn't been done before. It gets done every day where there's Arabica flowering. Okay, and it's going to make food taste fantastic. That's what honey does. It's in sausages, it's in sauces, it's in baking, it's in all sorts of stuff, and it makes food taste amazing. So I don't know what you guys think about this. Comment in the section below. Let me know what you think. I'd actually love to try some of this stuff. It's bee-free honey. You can tell it's getting some massive footprints in terms of marketing, and it's going viral. They have patents involved with this. You can actually start buying the production unit to make this yourself as well. I've recently emailed this to my email list, my subscribers, on my newsletter, and it's pretty scary actually as a beekeeper. Anyway, let me know what you think, and let's carry on with the rest of the challenges. Biosynthetic honey. So this is not fake honey per se, but it's not real honey either. It's not sugar, it's not corn syrup, but it's not honey that's been collected in the traditional sense from nectar on a flower, and then regurgitated in the hive, and then placed into a cell. Okay, so synthetic honey in many parts of the world, as well as what we call fake honey, is being marketed as real honey, which can be misleading to consumers who are looking for pure natural honey. It can result in a loss of trust in the honey industry, as consumers may become skeptical of claims made by honey producers. And in fact, this has happened to me multiple times in the shop in Centurion in South Africa, where we trade with BeeWare, and many times people have contacted us and said, "Oh, we see that you sell honey, and we're interested in it." And we tell them, "Oh, what?" And they are, "Well, what kind of honey do you have?" "Oh, you've got blue gum honey, or you've got citrus honey, or you've got lychee honey." And then they say to me, "Oh, but how do you get it to taste like the fruit, like the orange, or like the orange blossom, or the lychee? Do you flavor it?" And then I turn around and say, "No, actually, the bees have collected the honey from those flowers on those trees, and in order to, when they do that, they then pollinate that plant, generally speaking, which then allows that plant to make the fruit. Once it's been pollinated, it turns into the orange. But what ends up happening is that when the bees are doing that process, the honey becomes similar tasting in flavor in a very slight way to the fruit that it collected and pollinated that nectar from. And they're like, oh, okay, I understand. And I don't know how many times I've actually explained it to a customer. And so, it just shows how much misunderstanding or not knowing is out there in the market when one talks about different kind of varietals and tastes of honey or flavors of honey, where it's not being flavored. It's not being flavored with food flavoring to taste like that. Okay, it's literally been that citrus honey is from oranges. Lychee honey is that it's been collected from lychee flowers, lychee trees. Macadamia honey has been collected from macadamian trees. Now, the problem with synthetic honey is that this company that is making the synthetic honey is now claiming that they can make, for example, coffee honey, right? And by introducing coffee nectar and the synthetic chemicals from a bee's gut, right? But bees do that too. Where do you think they got the idea from? That's exactly what bees do. Bees go and forage on caffeine trees, which we've done in our honey episode. We've discussed this in our honey episode, where bees will go and collect from nectar from Arabica, and they will produce what tastes honey that kind of has a caffeinated taste, and in fact probably contains some caffeine. So the problem is the way that it's made is so misleading, is in a way that it's just really going to undercut all of the work that beekeepers actually do. And not only can it undercut our work that we do and the value in the foraged honey, okay, because I kind of perceive that we're going to have to start labeling our honey as foraged honey now, and that it's not going to be manufactured honey, right? It can be so detrimental to beekeepers, in my opinion, and also can undercut the price of production, because now you don't need a beehive, you don't need to have bees, you don't need to go drive the bees to a site, you don't need to have fencing, you don't have to have cameras, you don't need to have staff, you don't need to have a warehouse, you don't need to have all the honey harvesting equipment, you don't need to have any of the filtering equipment, you don't need to have bee suits, you don't need to have the risk of any of that. All you need to do is get the machine that then you can throw in the nectar on the nectar, synthetic substitute nectar on the one hand, you throw in the chemicals on the other side, you get it to put it together and you stir it up, and out pops the other side I think it's a few hours later, 6 to 7 hours later, or I think it was like something like you could do like 2 tons or something like that in about 12 hours. Bob's your uncle. You know how long it takes to make that with actual bees, 2 tons of honey? The volume of colonies you need to make 2 tons of honey over a period of a year, that's 2,000 kilograms at about 15 kilograms per hive as an average, over 130 hives in a year, okay? That's how long it takes to make 2 tons of honey. Oh, that's what it takes to make 2 tons of honey, all right? Is roughly over 130 hives over a period of a year, right? So, I mean, it's an insane risk and threat to our entire industry and to beekeeping as a whole. So not only are there those risks, but there's also health concerns. Synthetic honey often potentially higher levels of sugar. It's got the artificial synthetic nectar in there, which may or may not have negative health impacts. We don't know. Real honey, on the other hand, actually has natural antioxidants. It has enzymes. It has other beneficial compounds that are beneficial to our health, and that it also imbues the kind of natural elements of or the beneficiation of the plant, and that it collected that nectar from. So, for example, that's why if you happen to have bees on a coffee plantation, that honey is going to have caffeine in it. Okay, if you're going to have bees on a lavender plantation where there's a lavender farm, producing oils and things like that. If you've got 2 hives per hectare on there, you can produce 35 kilograms a year, okay, per hive on that plantation. And guess what? It's going to have a slight lavender taste. It's going to have a slight hint of lavender smell, but it's also going to have the benefit of lavender-based benefits to it, medicinal benefits to it, or health benefits to it, all right? Because it comes from the lavender plant, which we all know that lavender has got relaxing, anti-stress, antimicrobial kind of benefits and all that sort of stuff. When you're foraging nectar from that plant to make honey, it's going to carry some of that into the honey. Anyway, quality concerns are another issue. They may not have the same taste and aroma, and the nutritional value may not be the same as well. To address the challenge of synthetic honey, beekeepers and industry experts are calling for greater transparency in honey labeling and stronger regulation of honey products. They're also advocating for consumer education campaigns like the one I'm doing on my YouTube channel, and right here, you listening to this video right now, to raise awareness of the differences between real and synthetic honey. Synthetic honey is a growing challenge, and that is impacting the honey industry. While there are other efforts underway to address the issue, more needs to be done to ensure that consumers have access to pure, natural honey produced sustainably with respect for the bees and the environment. GMOs. So again here, Monsanto's involved, and it's the impact of genetically modified organisms. We've done a couple of videos talking about this as well. And beekeeping and honeybee pollination is a complex issue with GMOs. It's a range of potential impacts and effects, and here's what we found after investigating this issue. The background around GMOs. What's happened here is that these are crops that are genetically modified using biotechnology to enhance their resistance to pests, diseases, and potentially even environmental stresses. GMO crops are now widely used in agriculture. Soy is one of the biggest ones, so is corn. And they have become a source of controversy due to concerns about the impact on the environment and our human health. Sunflower is a massive one in South Africa, actually. It's one of the reasons why sunflowers have gone from being flowering for 6 weeks. They now only flower for 21 days. And that's down to it because they've become, and honeybees play a crucial role in pollinating these crops, and including many of these GMO crops. And there are many concerns that GMO crops may negatively affect bees and other pollinators. So we spoke with several beekeepers and experts in the field to better understand the impact of GMOs on beekeeping and honeybee pollination. One concern is that GMO crops may produce pollen or nectar that is actually toxic to honeybees. For example, we've talked about this before in a previous episode, some studies have suggested that Bacillus thuringiensis, BT, in brackets, toxin used in some GMO crops may actually harm honeybees and other pollinators. This toxin is designed to kill insects that feed on the plant, but it also may harm beneficial insects like honeybees through the pollen and the nectar. Another concern is that GMO crops may displace non-GMO crops over time, because by cross-pollination, these sources of food for honeybees may all become GMO-based. So some GMO crops like corn and soybeans have totally replaced traditional crops like clover and alfalfa, which are important sources of food for honeybees. This could lead to a reduction in honeybee population and their genetic pool and their genetic diversification, okay, as well as there being a decline then in crop yields. So where GMOs may be, the flag for GMOs is, oh yeah, production, and yields gone way up. The problem is what ends up happening now is that if your honeybee pollination and other pollinator numbers, if they drop, what's going to end up happening? You have a lose-lose situation where you have a really poor, you have a poor pollinator ratio to crop ratio that drops. And therefore your production now drops. So and then on top of that, you're getting actual crops that are not genetically modified and may not have the greatest result in the health benefit overall for us as humans, as well as animals that end up eating it as well. Because a lot of these GMO products go into food stock, and we eat that food stock. So it goes to cows, and eventually we eat the cows. So they're getting sick. What's happening when we eat the meat? Okay, we get sick. All right. So there's major concern that the use of pesticides in conjunction with GMO crops could have a negative effect on honeybees. I mean, this has been an ongoing thing for over a decade now. Many GMO crops are engineered to be resistant to herbicides like glyphosate, which is also a major product, or Roundup is the other word, that Bayer and Monsanto produce, and they make billions out of it. And it's widely used in agriculture. And the use of these herbicides can reduce the availability of food sources for honeybees and other pollinators. So at the end of the day, while impact of GMOs on honeybees and beekeeping is not yet fully understood, and there are ongoing research about this, and unfortunately some of it is actually being sponsored by the very companies that actually produce this stuff and make millions out of it, beekeepers and experts are calling for further research to better understand the impact of GMOs on honeybees and to develop strategies to mitigate any negative effects. So to address this issue, some beekeepers are actually promoting the use of non-GMO crops and organic farming methods and heirloom seeds to support honeybee populations, as well as to grow those kind of crops, not only for the benefit of pollinators, but also for the benefit of humanity and also for the benefit from our feedstock. In addition, researchers are exploring alternative methods for crop protection that rely on GMOs or pesticides. So the impact of GMOs on honeybees and beekeeping is a complex issue, and it requires further research and action. But as we continue to develop new agricultural technologies and practices, it is crucial that we consider the impact of these technologies on the environment and for the longevity of our ecosystem and for biodiversity itself, that services are provided by honeybees and other pollinators. Here's a bit more information around what we found with several studies conducted on the adverse effects of GMOs on honeybees. Number 1, a study conducted in 2012 by researchers at the University of Haifa in Israel found that honeybees fed on nectar from GMO corn plants containing the Bt toxin showed a significant reduction in their lifespan. The researchers concluded that the Bt toxin mentioned earlier as well may have had toxic effects on the honeybee's overall development and growth and quality of life. Another study, number 2, conducted in 2013 by researchers at the University of Buenos Aires in Argentina, found that honeybees that were exposed to glyphosate or Roundup, the herbicide commonly used in conjunction with GMO crops, because that's why they've developed the GMOs to withstand the glyphosate as well, showed a reduction in their gut microbiota. Okay, in other words, the microbes in their gut. And the same thing would happen to us, wouldn't it? Microbiome elements in our gut too, which is essential for health and immune system. Number 3, a study conducted in 2015 by researchers at the University of California, Riverside, found that honeybees that were exposed to a combination of glyphosate and the fungicide propiconazole showed a significant reduction in their ability to fight off infections, making them more vulnerable to disease. So maybe there's a connection here with colony collapse disorder, guys, as well as weaker colonies. Anyway, number 4, a review article published in the Journal of Agriculture and Food Chemistry in 2018 summarized several studies on the effects of GMO crops on honeybees. The review concluded that there is evidence to suggest that some GMO crops may have negative effects on honeybees, including reduced lifespan, impaired immune function, and the decreased reproductive success. I mean, that sounds pretty poor to me in terms of results, and outcomes, desired outcome. Really bad and really a real big threat to beekeeping as an industry. However, it is worth noting that not all studies have found negative effects on GMOs on honeybees. There was a study conducted in 2018 by researchers at the University of Tennessee that found no significant differences in honeybee health between colonies that were fed on non-GMO corn pollen and those that were fed on GMO corn pollen. So despite some conflicting findings, it's clear that there is growing concern among beekeepers and researchers about the potential adverse effects of GMOs on honeybees. As we continue to develop new agricultural technologies, it's crucial that we prioritize the protection of honeybee populations and their essential role in pollinating crops and maintaining ecosystems. Bearing in mind that in one of our previous episodes, we mentioned that one of the very studies that showed that there was no impact or very little impact on bees was actually one that was sponsored by Monsanto themselves. So, one has to take it with a pinch of salt, I think. What also they said in that study was that no tests were done on the actual quality of life of the bees in that period of time. So they were very specific on what they tested and what they didn't test. So the full citation for the review article I mentioned earlier will be in the description below, and that's the one from the Journal of Agriculture and Food Chemistry. So the next one here, guys, the next common challenge here is fires. Sounds like it's a little bit of an odd one to be talking about, but fires are a common challenge faced by beekeepers and the beekeeping industry. Veld fires will cause issues with your apiary sites. They burn hives. You can also lose forage that was available, as well as damage to just everything in the area. So ensuring that you're doing fire breakers during the autumn period is vital, and to maintain a low level of debris, dry debris especially, in your area. Ankle and shin guards as well, they can help for that too. It's possible to reduce the risk of snake encounters and bites when they may occur, and promoting safer and more sustainable beekeeping practices can only be good for the industry and for us as beekeepers, for you as a beekeeper as well. But in South Africa, beekeepers need to be cautious of several species of venomous snakes that are known to pose a risk to honeybees and beekeepers and anybody that's involved in the apiary site. And these would include black mamba, Cape cobra, Mozambique spitting cobra, the puff adder, and the boomslang. Okay, so especially I know somebody personally who was actually a victim of a spitting cobra, working out towards Nelspruit area, and unfortunately got some spit in the face and in his eye, and was luckily was able to drive fast enough to get to a hospital and get treatment before it actually took complete effect on his eyesight. And because you can lose your eyesight completely, okay, and all your life potentially, if you end up trying to drive while you can't see and you're visually impaired, as well as any other poisonous bites that are coming into play. So these snakes are known to be attracted to beehives due to the presence of honey and pollen, and they can cause significant damage to beehives. But it's important for beekeepers in South Africa to take precautions and implement measures to prevent snake encounters, using snake repellents where possible, especially around your ankles and your shins, and also to take precautions when working around your beehives, especially, and also under your beehives, checking what's going on there before you actually lift them and things like that. Next challenge is absconding. So a lot of beekeepers end up either buying their colonies or potentially catching colonies or inheriting colonies from another party, and unfortunately a couple of weeks later, especially over the winter period, the colonies then leave and abscond. Okay, so it's where a colony of bees suddenly leaves the hive and does not return. It can be a significant challenge for beekeepers, whether you're a commercial beekeeper or a beginner. It's a phenomenon that can occur for a variety of reasons. It could be down to disease, pest infestations, environment factors, and it can result in significant losses for beekeepers. Largely, it's also down to food and available food that's in the area, but it also could be down to things like hive beetles and or wax moth. But generally speaking, it's usually going to be down to lack of food in the area. That's when they're going to leave, or they've actually potentially got a lack of space, and instead of just having a split, the whole colony decides that they can actually move. So when a colony absconds, beekeeper loses not only the bees themselves, but also the honey and the time and products that the bees would have produced. This can have a significant financial impact on beekeepers, particularly small-scale beekeepers who can rely or who need to rely on their honeybee colonies for income. In addition to financial losses, absconding colonies can also have ecological implications. Honeybees are important pollinators, and when a colony absconds, there is a corresponding reduction in pollination services that can impact crops and other plants in the surrounding area. Now, there's an argument on the other hand that if a colony has absconded, it probably means that there's already a significant amount of colonies in the area, and or a lack of sustaining food in the area. So there is that potential argument there as well. But to mitigate the risk of absconding colonies, beekeepers can take several steps. So it is important actually to find out why you think a colony has absconded in your area. Is it down to the food? And if it isn't down to food, then these next steps are important to consider. Regular monitoring of a hive to identify potential issues such as the disease or pests, taking measures to address these issues before they result in colony absconding is vital. Okay, so you've got to be looking out for wax moth, for mites, varroa mites, and for small hive beetles. Okay, and also ants. Ants are a major issue as well. Ants can absolutely drive a colony away. Okay, and make them want to abscond. As beekeepers, we can also providing them with suitable habitat, including adequate food, all right, and water, to help prevent environmental stresses that can lead to absconding. And this can also be a seasonal thing. It may mean that you have like good food for 6 months of the year. What happens with the rest of the forage for the other 6 months of the year? That's when potentially feeding can come into play. But you also have to be careful that you're not going to either cause dysentery for your colonies by overfeeding them sugar water, and or introduce that sugar water now being converted into honey, or not honey, but adulterated honey. In other words, it's stored in the colony, and when you go to harvest, you don't know what portion of your potential sugar water has now been converted into the comb, and you harvest that thinking it's honey, and it's not. It's actually sugar water mixed with some naturally foraged nectar. Okay, so you do need to be careful of that, and this would then result in you having to be mobile with your colonies and maybe move them to 2 or 3 sites throughout the year in order to give them enough food. Okay, additionally, beekeepers can also take measures to ensure that colonies are healthy and free from disease and pests, such as by using effective disease management strategies and implementing integrated pest management practices that we normally talk about and teach in our courses, as well as you can have a look at our previous videos. But overall, while absconding colonies can be a significant challenge for beekeepers, taking proactive measures to prevent and address these issues can help promote a sustainable and thriving beekeeping industry, as well as a beekeeping hobby or even business. So, some general information on the prevalence of absconding colonies worldwide. According to a study published in the Journal of Apicultural Research in 2017, absconding colonies were reported by beekeepers in 34 out of 71 countries surveyed, with a reported incident rate of 15.3%. It's not that high, but it is significant. The highest incidence rate were reported in Africa and Asia, but our bees have a natural tendency by nature to abscond and move and be mobile and to trek. So that I don't find much of a problem. It also, mind you, contributes to our genetic diversity, and I think that there's major strength in the genetic diversity of bees in Africa because they abscond. Okay, whereas in a lot of European countries and even in the US, they don't like bees that have absconded. They don't like wild colonies, or natural colonies, because they feel like they are the ones that purport more diseases and more pests, when actually, in fact, they're probably much more adapted to surviving and thriving with pests and diseases than the managed bees are. Okay, over time, especially over time. And the highest incidence rates were reported in Africa and Asia, as I said earlier, with some countries reporting incidence rates as high as 80%, which, as I say, is not necessarily a bad thing. It also may lend itself to the fact that a lot of African beekeeping is done in bark hives, and it's not necessarily conducive, the conditions aren't necessarily conducive to colony being as proficiently or effectively managed as one that are kept in Kenyan topper hives and or in Langstroth hives that would be done in a commercial sense. But there's also the seasonal issue of where things are growing and where they're flowering versus where the bees are, and they're going to track to that location. Okay, so specific data on the impact of absconding colonies on the South African beekeeping industry is not really available, but it is likely that this issue has a significant impact on beekeepers in the country too, particularly given the high prevalence of absconding colonies in other African countries. As I say, I think this is a pro and a con at the same time. Absconding colonies can result in significant financial losses for beekeepers, as well as ecological implications due to the reduction in pollination services. but they can be easily replaced as well, as you can tell in our previous videos, where it's quite easy. It's actually absconding colonies. It may be one beekeeper's problem, but it's another it's going to generally become another beekeeper's benefit. If I lose a colony today, then another beekeeper can get it next week. You know what I mean? And vice versa. So that goes on, quite regularly in the country and within the industry. And as such, addressing this issue is an important priority for beekeepers and researchers alike. Efforts to identify and address the underlying causes of absconding colonies are ongoing. And to me, I think it's largely a natural thing. I think bees do it. They've done it for ages. It's just that us as humans want to manage this now and think it's an issue. And I don't think it's an issue at all. I think it's just a natural process. When the bees feel that they can't stay where they are because there's a lack of food, or there's too many pests, or there's pesticides, or whatever the case may be, they're going to move. And why the hell shouldn't they? We would be doing the same thing, So, in my opinion, it is a natural process for bees to be able to do this. I don't see it as a major con in the industry, but it is something that you should be aware of, and that you should be managing the causes that may lead to absconding outside of things like, just the bees absconding, But there's going to be a reason that bees abscond. So if you get to the reason that they're absconding, it's usually going to be one of those three major things. It's pests, it's food, or it's a lack of a significant kind of comfortable area, living space for them, or potentially, which we're going to cover a little bit later, you could be as one of the challenges is over, call it, handling of the bees. Okay, so if you are doing inspections way too often, this can also cause the bees to become unsettled, if that makes sense. Now, I am going to say a little bit extra on the side here. If you look at the links in the description below, you will be able to get hold of this particularly good solution or opportunity to see it as a solution for absconding colonies within an apiary. Is that we stock a swarm lure or swarm wipe that has been specifically tested and created and studied by a university in Europe, where we are the sole importers of this, licensed importers of this particular swarm lure wipe, and it has been proven that if it is used within a 50 meter radius of an existing apiary, inside a catch box or a brood chamber, that any colony that is absconding or attempting to abscond, that it has something like a 75% success rate of actually attracting that absconding colony into that swarm lured catch box that has a swarm wipe in it. And then obviously you need to decide what are the elements of why that's been the case. So it may attract a tracking colony too. We also use it for that, but it is specifically proven to show that it can attract even up to a 90% success rate of an absconding colony within 50 meters of an existing apiary, that they will move into this catch box that has this particular product. And I'll put a link in the description below. So take a look at that. It's pretty interesting. All right, so number 9, as far as common challenges go, losing a queen. Colony will eventually die out as well. But there are several reasons why a colony may lose its queen bee, including disease, predators, or accidental death. In many cases, as a beginner hobbyist, that is likely to be the main cause is accidental death, her being squashed or something. In some cases, they may intentionally replace an aging or underperforming queen with a new queen to maintain colony health and productivity. I never really do this, but I know that there are many beekeepers that do mark their queens. I mark my queens, but there are many beekeepers that mark their queens with the appropriate color for the year, where we have queen pens available, queen bee marking pens available in the shop, and each year has a corresponding color to it, And so that the use of that is that then more or less using a particular color to mark a new queen. Then you'll know by looking at her what year she was born in. Okay, and the significance of this is that then a lot of beekeepers will look at the color of the queen, and then once she's 2 years old, they replace her. And the reason being is that they want to ensure that the virility and health of the colony, the breeding capacity of the colony, the laying capacity of the colony, and that queen is kept at a very high level. Okay, now I don't do any of this. I like to keep my colonies natural, and they can control it themselves. But there is an option out there. I do mark my queens so that I know how old they are, but I don't do it for the point that I want to replace my queens, unless there has been an accidental death or loss of the queen. But in cases where queen bee is lost, okay, beekeepers may choose to introduce a new queen to the colony. By introducing a new queen bee that has been raised by the beekeeper, or by allowing the colony to raise a new queen from an existing larvae, they will create emergency queens as well. If there's enough young eggs, really young eggs, like eggs that are younger than 3 to 4 days old, then they can create a bunch of emergency queens to replace a lost queen. But overall, while losing a queen bee can be a significant challenge for beekeepers, taking proactive measures to maintain colony health, being careful with your frames, and working with your frames and the bees while you are doing harvesting and stuff, productivity can help mitigate the risk of queen loss and promote a sustainable and thriving apiary. There are a number of people that also actually sell queen cells and or sell very small colonies with a queen to people that are looking to expand their beekeeping operations. I, for a time, was actually creating queen bees to sell on to people, especially people that have pollination contracts and require a large amount of colonies to be replaced every year. Because when you're talking about 15% on 1,000 colonies is 150 colonies that may or may not abscond in a year alone. Just that number is a massive number of colonies to replace for a beekeeper in and around their general management and operations of a commercial pollination service. So they do look to outsource queen rearing and making queens, making new queens, and being able to buy them is a much faster way for somebody to focus on their rather than to focus on that. They can focus on their actual business, their core business. So there is a business opportunity there as well for anybody looking to create more queens. Come on our course, on our intermediate course, we teach you how to do that on a commercial basis. And then you can sell queens and small colonies on to other beekeepers, new or established. And check the description links below. So number 10 as common challenges are bee stings. Okay, bee stings are a common challenge for beekeepers and can pose a significant risk to their health and safety. Some beekeepers I know have started beekeeping not being allergic, and then they become allergic, unfortunately. I've also known of very few stories, but I have known of some stories where there's been a mild allergy reaction to bees, and over time people have become attuned to it, or they've become less reactive to it because they've worked with bees. But in the gist of that, they've also taken massive precautions of having EpiPens and other steps to manage any reaction in the case of them having a major kickback again with their allergies. Most bee stings are relatively harmless, but they only cause mild discomfort and lots of itching and scratching, right? Some individuals may experience severe allergic reactions, and that they may require immediate medical attention and reaction. So EpiPens are one of those issues. One of those things that you may want to be carrying around with you in any event, just as a precautionary measure. Beekeepers can take several steps to mitigate the risk of bee stings. Wearing protective clothing that we sell at the shop, which is made in South Africa, such as bee suits and gloves, can help prevent stings. Also, wearing proper footwear is important. Using smoke properly to calm the bees, minimize their aggression. Regular inspections of the hives can also help identify potential issues before they become an issue, which then may increase the risk of stings as well as them swarming, and attacking, such as pest infestations or overcrowding. Despite these measures, Beekeepers may still be at risk of bee stings, particularly during periods of high activity and especially when particularly aggressive bee colonies, which does happen. Bee colonies do have different personalities, largely determined by the queen, but also can be determined by conditions where there is significant heat, that the bees are struggling with excess heat, and also a lack of space. And when those two things can combine, the colony can become exceptionally aggressive and defensive. Okay, so in such cases, beekeepers may need to take additional precautions to protect themselves, such as using specialized beekeeping tools and equipment, working with a partner who can provide assistance in the event of an emergency. But also I would suggest and recommend that you also notify people of when to expect you to be able to make contact again with them once you've been out, going out to an apiary, doing your work, and then being able to be back and report in. Okay, make sure that people are aware that they should be checking times and things like that, and make sure that they know where you're actually going to be located, so that if and when they don't hear from you, that they can take appropriate action. In addition to these steps, you can also take antihistamine tablets as well. I would also recommend, like in previous videos I've mentioned, make sure that you remove any constrictive jewelry like rings on your fingers, so that if you do take a sting on your finger or on your hand, that the swelling doesn't get to the point where you can actually potentially cause damage, where you may end up really having a constriction in your finger with a ring or jewelry, and including watches as well might be another issue as well. Just remove that stuff. It's also avoid, if ever you have the unfortunate experience of vandals and theft while you're out working on your bees, at least then you also will not have any jewelry actually on your person anyway. So important to have antihistamines. You can get celestamine is one of the ones. Allergex is another one that's over the counter, but it does require that you probably take 2 or 3 of those and not just one. But that's not medical advice. I'm not a medical practitioner. And just make sure that you can actually take the stuff as well, that you don't have an allergy to the celestamine or Allergex antihistamine type of tablets. Bee stings can be a significant challenge for beekeepers. It's important to note that bees play an essential role in pollination, a valuable resource for our agricultural and food production. But bee stings can also be used and harvested. Okay, I used to have a piece of equipment where you can actually harvest bee venom, and it sells for a lot of money. Okay, but it is hard to collect, very hard to collect, and the equipment is not cheap. But it is something that can be done, and bee venom is highly sought after. It's important for beekeepers to research, to continue working together and identify and address underlying cause of bee aggression. I think I've alluded to a lot of that one anyway, but it'll also impact bee health and the productivity if you're losing bees because they're stinging the heck out of you. Okay, every worker that gets lost is a worker that cannot be used as a forager in the colony anymore. So beekeepers can help ensure the long-term sustainability of the apiaries and important ecological and economic benefits that bees provide by limiting the number of bee stings they take. Okay, and so just the correct use or appropriate use of smoke can play a massive role here, guys. Don't smoke with too hot fuel. Make sure that you're not over smoking, make sure that you're not under smoking, and also make sure that when you are smoking, you're not smoking directly down into the hive. Okay, and allow for enough time to pass between actually smoking at the first time round and you opening up the actual colony and opening up the lid. The limit there is probably about 2.5 minutes. I would say a minimum of 2 minutes you should be waiting after giving about 4 or 5 really decent, good puffs of smoke. And also make sure that, like we've spoken about this before in previous episodes, we also talk about this on our courses and our training in Midrand on a monthly basis. The correct use of fuel, the right type of fuel makes a massive difference as well. Okay, using natural fuels can also make a massive difference when it comes to bee stings and the aggression or defensive ability level of your colonies. It also is going to make a massive difference, by the by, in whether or not you taint the honey. Okay, you can taint your honey with the taste of smoke, and although that may be desirable in some cases, because you get smoked beef and smoked chili sauces and stuff like that, smoked honey is not the best quality of honey to go for. Okay, or taste of honey to go for in your end product, especially if you're going to be looking at exporting it or looking at very specialized niche markets where smoked honey is going to be seen as a low quality honey, okay, despite the fact that it may otherwise be a very high quality source of honey. If it's tainted with smoke, you're going to lose quality. All right. And last but not least, number 11, we alluded to earlier on, over inspecting your hives. Okay, this can also have other issues. And so inspecting hives too frequently is a common challenge for beekeepers, especially beginners. It has negative consequences for bee colonies. It's important to monitor the health and productivity of bee colonies, but excessive frequent inspections can disrupt bees' natural behavior and cause stress and agitation to them. It can also actually damage the eggs and the larvae as well, especially if you're doing this during cold periods. And it also tampers with the internal climate control and thermostat of the colony itself as well. And then the bees have to work harder to replace that internal temperature of 36 degrees. Okay, so when bees are disturbed too often, they become defensive and aggressive as well. Can increase the risk of stings for the beekeeper, and potentially harm the colony overall. But additionally, excessive inspections can disrupt the hive's temperature and humidity, which we talked about just now, and it impacts the development of the bee larvae and the overall health of the colony. So to minimize the risk of inspecting hives too frequently, you should follow a regular inspection schedule that balances the need for monitoring with the need to minimize disturbance. You can also do external inspections, which is what I've spoken about in previous videos. The schedule may vary depending on factors such as the size and strength of the colony, what season you're in, and your goals as a beekeeper and your objectives. For example, if you're making queen bees, you're going to need to be inspecting that really regularly, like every third or fourth day, especially when it gets to the 14th day when the queens can start emerging, and what to do with the queens, for example. And then also you're going to be needing to watch where you have drones, where you're making drones so that the drones are ready to mate with the queens, and when the virgin queen is ready to mate and she does a mating flight. The same thing may happen when you are wanting to produce a expansion of worker bees in your colony. You need to work back at least 25 days for that, maybe even up to 30 days for that, so that 30 days prior to a really good springtime blooming of flowers, for example, you want to work back 30 days. So that's when you can start doing a little bit of feeding, sugar, water, or making sure that the bees have enough food, so that by the time you can stimulate the queen into laying more and more eggs during the winter period, so that come the time that it's springtime, that there's 2x the number of workers that would have been there otherwise. All right. So in my opinion, beekeepers should aim to inspect the hive no more than once every 2 weeks or so, other than when I've already mentioned during an active season, even less frequently during periods of low activity or when the colony is particularly strong and healthy. During inspections, beekeepers should also take care to minimize disturbance by using smoke and other techniques we've already discussed to calm the bees, and work efficiently to minimize the amount of time that the hive is actually open. So by taking these steps, beekeepers can help ensure the health and productivity of their hive and the colonies while minimizing the risk of disrupting the bees' natural behavior, causing unnecessary stress and agitation. Hey, and finally, I've actually decided to add a bonus challenge. So this is challenge number 12, and that one has to do with not enough training. I really think that, and I was a victim of this myself in a lot of ways when I first started out like 20 years ago. Just not having enough training and education in beekeeping can result in several challenges for the industry and for you as an individual beekeeper if you're watching this, right? Firstly, beekeeping is a complex and highly specialized field. It requires a deep understanding of bee behavior, hive management, honey production, pest control, even handling equipment. Without adequate training and education, beekeepers may struggle to properly manage their hives as hobbyists, and even as somebody who's an intermediate, may not be able to produce high quality honey or maintain the health of their bees in the beginning or in a prolonged period of time. In addition, beekeepers who lack training and education may be more susceptible to losses due to diseases, pests, and/or environmental factors. They may also struggle to identify and address problems in their hives, which can lead to the spread of disease and the loss of entire colonies, and therefore even their passion and interest in the beekeeping itself, right? Furthermore, Not having sufficient knowledge of beekeeping can result in unsafe practices as well that can endanger the beekeeper and those around them. For example, beekeepers who do not understand how to properly handle and manage bees may be at risk of getting stung more than they should, and that can be dangerous for those who are allergic to bee venom and or animals in the area as well. Overall, the lack of training and education in beekeeping is a significant challenge for the industry and individual beekeepers in South Africa. So to address this, there are several programs and initiatives aimed at providing beekeepers with necessary knowledge and skills to effectively manage their hives and produce high quality honey. And these programs include training workshops that we offer monthly there in Midrand. We also do mentorship programs. We have additional resources via our books and our ebooks, and we've also got our online academy which is available as well. So if you're interested in this, it's designed to support beekeepers at all levels of experience, right? And it's available in the description links below, or you can go and visit www.startbeekeeping.co.za. Check out the online academy. Alternatively, come to BeeWare.co.za and you can have a look at our ongoing Bee Institute and our training workshops that we offer from beginner level all the way through to commercial bee removals as well. So thanks for joining us today, and as awesome, like and subscribe, and we'll check you on the other side. Ciao for now.